Hello, this is Dr. James Camp from Lee College in Baytown, Texas, and this is the cranial nerves. To sum up where we are in the nervous system, so far we've divided the nervous system in two ways. We've divided the central nervous system from the peripheral nervous system, and we've divided the cranial region from the spinal region. In the cranial region, the brain communicates back and forth with the cranial nerves, and the cranial nerves receive information from the special senses. Cranial nerves also communicate with facial muscles and facial glands and things. In the spinal region, the spinal cord communicates back and forth with spinal nerves. The spinal nerves receive information from general senses, but then the cranial nerves also receive information from general senses. Okay, so those are all the pieces of the nervous system that we're going to cover. So far, we have covered the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. Today, I'm going to cover the cranial nerves. The cranial nerves are similar in structure to the spinal nerves, but they have four major differences. They come directly out of the brainstem, or in one case, the olfactory nerve, they come out of the cerebrum itself. They don't come out of the spinal cord. Okay, that's the most obvious difference. They're cranial, so they come out of the brain instead of the spine. There's no plexusing. One nerve root equals one named nerve. So in the cranial nervous system, we had sometimes roots, say C5, C6, and C7 would mix and match to create the median nerve or the radial nerve. In this case, cranial nerve stem 4 is going to be the trochlear nerve always. Okay, that is just one number equals one name. The numbering is different. Instead of numbering first by segment and then by plain old Arabic numerals, we number them all with the abbreviation CN for cranial nerve, and then the Roman numerals I through XII. Okay, if you were one of those people who back in elementary school when they were teaching you Roman numerals said, when am I ever going to use this? The answer is today. If you need a brief recap on your Roman numerals, remember that an I equals 1, a V equals 5, and an X equals 10. And if you put a letter after a bigger letter, that adds to it. If you put a letter before a bigger number, that subtracts to it. So IV is 4, VI is 6. Okay. And finally, whereas the spinal nerves, at least the numbered ones, were all both motor and sensory, any particular numbered cranial nerve can be motor only, meaning it only carries information to and from muscles, sensory only, meaning it only receives information from a particular special sense organ, or both. It can be a mixed function nerve. A traditional challenge for pre-health students of one sort or another, and it will be for you in my class as well, is to list the cranial nerves by number and name. That is, I'll give you a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you will fill in the names of the cranial nerves in order. How do you do this? A traditional first step is to learn the first letters of each nerve in order. Why? Because there are all sorts of cute phrases you can make using the first letters of all the cranial nerves. Here's a really tame one I pulled from an anatomy book. Oh, once one takes the anatomy final, very good vacations are happening. I hope that phrase is actually true for you. If it is, great. If not, well, you can still remember the phrase. If that's a little tricky for you to remember or just not very interesting, you can look on the internet for cranial nerve memory phrases, and there are a ton of them, many of them rather risque, many of them having to do with sex or alcohol, and many of them quite funny, others just over the top and odd. Find one that sticks in your memory, and you too can remember that the order of the cranial nerves is OOOTTA FVGVAH. Now, once you have that, you still have to fill in the names of the actual rest of the names. It helps me to remember them a little bit by function, so I'm going to introduce them to you here based on what they do. I'm going to give you the sensory first, and then the both, and well, then some of the motor, and then some of the both. Okay. So first, the three sensory nerves. Cranial nerve 1 is the olfactory nerve. If you happen to know that olfaction means smell, cranial nerve 1 is first because it's at the very front of your brain where it communicates through the olfactory foramina, remember those from the ethmoid bone, with the olfactory sensors in the nasal cavity. Cranial nerve 2 is second because it is the optic nerve. It is communicating with the eyeballs, with the retina of the eye, through the optic canal or optic foramen in the sphenoid bone. So you can see that these two are both placed at the front of the brain for a reason. The other sensory nerve skips us all the way down to cranial nerve 8, and it is the vestibulocochlear nerve. The vestibule is an organ in your inner ear that senses equilibrium, and the cochlea is an organ in your inner ear that senses hearing. So this cranial nerve provides the special senses of equilibrium and hearing. Cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6 are all motor-only nerves that deal with the eyes. The oculomotor nerve deals with four external eye muscles and 2 internal ones. Rather than tell you which 4 external eye muscles, it's easier to tell you the 2 that there are 6 external eye muscles, which 2 aren't oculomotor. The trochlear nerve handles the superior oblique eye muscle, and the abducens nerve handles the lateral rectus eye muscle. The superior oblique is called trochlear because it's an odd little muscle that sticks to the inside of the orbit and communicates to the eye through a tendon that goes through a little pulley called a trochlea. The abducens is called that because the lateral rectus muscle abducts the eyeball. So if you can remember that, that can help you remember the name of the nerve. All right, now for a couple of mixed both nerves. The trigeminal nerve, you remember Gemini means twins, trigeminal means triplets. So the trigeminal nerve quickly breaks into 3 branches. We're not going to learn the names of the 3 branches, but one of them goes up to your forehead, one of them goes to your maxilla, and one goes to your mandible. The trigeminal nerve provides sense from all of your general senses from all of your face, your facial skin, for example, and your cornea, the sense of touch and such. and it provides motor to the muscles of mastication. Cranial nerve 7 is called the facial nerve. While trigeminal nerve provides sense from the general senses from the face, facial nerve provides motor to the muscles of facial expression. So if you have a person if you know a person who has sort of a droopy face because of a stroke, it was the facial nerve that got knocked out. The facial nerve also provides the sense of taste from the front 2/3 of the tongue. That's supposed to be a tongue. That's a horrible drawing. Okay. The sense of taste from the front 2/3 of the tongue. The sense of taste from the back 1/3 of the tongue is provided by the glossopharyngeal nerve. Glossa means tongue in Greek. Pharynx is Latin for throat, so this is the tongue and throat nerve. It provides the sense of taste from the back 1/3 of the tongue, and it provides some motor to swallowing muscles and speech muscles in the pharynx. Most of your swallowing and speech muscles are provided by cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve. But the name of the vagus nerve comes from the fact that it has an odd little property. It leaves the head, leaves the cranium, and wanders through the organs of the abdomen, the thoracic and abdominal cavity. So it innervates the heart and the breathing tubes and the digestive organs and all sorts of other internal organs. Vagus comes from the same root as vagabond or vacation, and it means to go about. So the vagus nerve is the wanderer. Finally, 2 more motor nerves. The accessory nerve is cranial nerve 11. It's called an accessory nerve because it actually acts like a spinal nerve. It goes and joins the the cervical plexus in innervating muscles of the neck. So this one does the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the trapezius muscle, if I remember correctly. Muscles that move the head and neck. Finally, cranial nerve 12 is the hypoglossal. There's that word glossa again. Hypo means under, so this is the under the tongue nerve, and it provides motor to muscles that move the tongue. Okay. One last memory trick. It's often helpful in remembering the names of the cranial nerves to remember which ones are sensory, motor, or both. And sometimes you might be asked, I don't think it'll be in my exam this time around, but it might come up in your nursing exams or something. Which cranial nerves are sensory, which are motor, and which are both? So those are sensory, sensory, motor, motor, both, motor, both, sensory, both, motor, motor. And as you can, as you would expect, there are cute little memory phrases out there for those as well. One that I picked up from one of my students once is a little more risque than the first one that I gave you. It says, "Some say marry money, but my brother says beautiful bodies matter more." Good advice for those of you who aren't married yet. Okay, so there you go again. Sensory, sensory, motor, motor, both sensory, both motor, motor. Okay. If you combine these two phrases in your memory, you can get the first letters of every cranial nerve written down pretty quickly, and then you can figure out the functions of each cranial nerve, and hopefully between those two, that'll help you remember all of the cranial nerves. Okay, finally, a little bit of creative counting. How do you find the cranial nerves on the underside of a brain? They're not as simple as the spinal nerves where you can just start at the top and count down 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, etc. But they are more or less in order, and if you remember, if you can learn this sort of creative counting practice that I'm about to teach you, you can get them in order. Okay, cranial nerve 1 starts at the very front of the brain. Cranial nerve 2 just behind it. Cranial nerve 3 sits here at the top of the pons. It actually comes out from a little groove between the halves of the midbrain. Cranial nerve 4 comes out from behind the midbrain here, so you may actually have to take your brain model apart to find cranial nerve 4. Cranial nerve 5 sits to the side of the pons, and so far we have this kind of counting of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, going down the midline of the brain and then around the pons. Okay, then we switch counting to starting at the junction between the pons and the medulla, and we get cranial nerve 6, 7, and 8 all in a row here at the junction of the pons and the medulla. And then we have cranial nerve 9, 10, and 11 running down the side of the medulla. Okay. So you actually have 6 of the cranial nerves here right in order, running along that groove between the pons and the medulla, and then down the side of the medulla. Handily enough, all of the ones here at the junction of the pons and the medulla are V and then some number of I's. Okay, all of the ones running down the side of the medulla are have an X, either IX or XI, if that helps you remember at all. Finally, we switch counting one more time, and we put cranial nerve 12 here back on the front of the medulla. I think they just had found 11 nerves and there was one extra, so they named it 12. That's not really in any order at all. Okay. So now you know the names of the cranial, how to remember the names of the cranial nerves, something about the function of the cranial nerves, and how to find the location of the cranial nerves. Go to lab, find your nerves, test your nerves, and get on your professor's last nerve. Okay. Thank you very much and have a good day.